The forest was alive with fury. Rain slashed through the branches, soaking Alara's hair until it clung heavy against her face. Her breath tore from her lungs in short, desperate bursts as her bare feet pounded the mud. Thorns split her skin, each step carving pain into her legs, but stopping meant death. Behind her, the growls came, low, guttural, too close, the sound of hunger wrapped in darkness. Her cloak, once a shield, now hung in shreds, snagging on every branch that whipped at her arms. She stumbled, caught herself, and ran harder. Her pulse was wild, frantic, each beat a reminder that she was still alive, barely. Somewhere inside that chaos, a memory clawed up, cruel and mocking, her twin's laughter. Not the warm laugh she once knew, but sharp, triumphant, echoing in her head, like the forest itself was laughing at her. Her body ached, heat pooling in her veins, silver light flashing across her fingertips. Her claws, half-shifted, trembling, uncontrollable, glowed faintly against the dark. She tried to push it back, to smother the power before it consumed her, but the harder she fought, the stronger it burned. It terrified her. Power was never a gift in her world. It was a curse, the thing that made her dangerous, the thing that made her unwanted. The storm mirrored her turmoil. Branches cracked and fell around her, the ground caving beneath rushing water. Cold rain blinded her, icy sheets tearing at her skin. She didn't know if the forest wanted to drown her, bury her, or save her. All she knew was that she had to keep moving. Every muscle screamed, but the fear of being caught screamed louder. And then, silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that makes your stomach drop. The kind that tells you something worse has found you. Her chest heaved as she stumbled into a small clearing, the moonlight breaking through the storm for one haunting moment. Her heart thrashed against her ribs as she felt it, the weight of eyes watching her. The air itself thickened, charged with power that pressed against her chest, stealing her breath. A shadow shifted at the edge of the trees, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, a presence so heavy it made the storm seem like background noise. Her body froze, trembling not from cold, but from recognition. She didn't need to see his face to know. She felt it in her bones, in the pull that threatened to drag her to her knees. The Alpha. He stood just beyond the storm's veil, every inch of him radiating dominance and danger, and he wasn't here by accident. He was here for her. Before we uncover her fate, subscribe to Clarissa Romance Collections, where every tale is raw, untamed, unforgettable. Because in this story, survival is only the beginning. The shadow stepped forward, peeling itself from the trees as though the forest itself had shaped him. Lightning carved his figure against the storm, tall, unyielding, every movement coiled with lethal grace. The air bent around him, charged and suffocating. Each breath Alara drew tightening her lungs. His eyes burned gold, feral light piercing through the rain. Not merely a man, not merely a wolf. He was the Alpha King, and every bone in her body knew it. Her pulse stuttered. She tried to move, to retreat back into the trees, but her body betrayed her. Her legs quivered, rooted by the sheer weight of his presence. The storm seemed to shrink, silence folding in around them until there was nothing but the thunder of her heartbeat and the unbearable heat of his gaze. And then he spoke. Alara. Her name fell from his lips, rough and certain, as though he had always known it. She hadn't offered it. She hadn't spoken it aloud since the night she was cast out. Yet, he said it like a truth carved into stone, like he had carried it in his chest long before tonight. A shiver crawled up her spine, settling cold at the base of her neck. How did he know her name? She stumbled back a step, mud sucking at her ankles. No, she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was denying. Him, the sound of her name, or the terrifying rush in her blood. The forest answered before he did. Growls erupted from the trees. Shapes lunged from the storm. Rogue wolves, their eyes dull with madness, pelts slick with rain. They burst forward, snapping jaws glinting in the half-light. Alara's instincts screamed. She raised her hands, silver flickers sparking at her fingertips. But before she could shift, before the power inside her could break loose, he moved. Kalen was fury given form. His body shifted in a heartbeat, bones snapping, flesh warping, his roar splitting the storm wide open. His wolf was monstrous, larger than any she had seen, pelt black as night, fangs curved like blades. He tore through the rogues with savage precision, each strike a brutal symphony of power. Blood mixed with rain, the forest floor steaming as bodies fell limp beneath him. Ilara staggered, watching, unable to look away. He wasn't fighting to protect. He wasn't fighting for mercy. He fought like a king defending a throne no one could ever take from him. His violence was terrifying, and yet, she couldn't deny the way her chest tightened, the way something deep and unwanted coiled in her gut as she watched him. When the last rogue hit the ground, silence returned. Kalen stood over the carnage, his wolf's chest heaving, golden eyes locked on her. Blood dripped from his jaws, steam curling off his body. Slowly bones cracked back into place, fur receding, until the man emerged again. Naked but unashamed, dominance rolling off him like smoke. He did not cover himself. He did not waver. He stood as though the storm itself bowed to him. Ilara's throat dried. She looked away, heat burning under her skin, but even without his eyes on her, she could feel him, every inch of him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. His steps crushed the ground between them, deliberate and slow. He stopped close enough that the warmth of him cut through the cold rain, close enough that she felt the tremor of his power sliding across her skin. "You are mine." The words struck harder than the storm. They weren't a question. They weren't a plea. They were a vow, a brand pressed into her soul. Ilara's chest tightened, breath catching in her throat. Fear and something darker twisted together, pulling her in two directions at once. He was dangerous. He was everything she had been taught to run from, and yet his voice curled inside her, pulling at something she couldn't name. "No," she forced out, though her body betrayed her with its trembling. "You don't even know me." His mouth curved, not quite a smile, not quite a threat. "I've always known you." The ground seemed to tilt beneath her. Every instinct screamed to run, but her feet refused to move. His words lodged deep, digging into the cracks of her denial. She wanted to demand answers, to shout at him, to demand why he had come, why he spoke her name, as though he had carried it his entire life. But the storm inside her chest left no space for words. The silence stretched, thick with tension, broken only by the storm's fading growl. Finally, she found her voice, sharp with suspicion. "Were you hunting me? Or saving me?" His golden eyes burned brighter, holding her in a grip she could not break. He stepped closer, so close the air shook with his growl. "Both." Her breath hitched. Fear clashed with the fire pooling low in her belly, two enemies warring inside her ribcage. She had lived her life on the run, heart wrapped in steel, but here, in the storm, with this alpha who claimed what was not his, she felt the steel begin to crack. And in that shattering silence, Kalen leaned closer, voice a low snarl meant only for her. "You are mine, Ilara. From this moment, mine." The storm roared back to life around them, as if the world itself understood what had just been claimed. The storm drifted into silence, leaving only the weight of his claim echoing in her chest. Ilara stood in the clearing, mud clinging to her feet, breath shallow and uneven, while Kalen's golden eyes refused to release her. The world had shifted in a single moment, but she could not yet understand how. His words clung to her skin like heat, but behind the fire, shadows stirred, shadows of everything she had fought to bury. Her gaze broke from his, falling to the torn earth around her, to the broken branches, and the blood the rain was slowly washing away. For every heartbeat she stood in his presence, another memory surfaced, unwanted and sharp, tearing her open from the inside. She remembered the village square, where laughter had never belonged to her, where eyes slid past her, and landed on her twin instead, Ceres, glowing like sunlight, adored as though the world had been made only to worship her smile. Alara had stood in the shadows of that adoration, watching as the pack whispered, "That one is cursed. The fire will eat her alive. She is not safe among us." She had been born minutes later than her sister, but the difference had carved a chasm that never closed. Alara could still hear their voices, soft enough to sting, sharp enough to scar, the way mothers pulled their children close when she walked by, the way young wolves dared each other to touch her cloak, as though she carried sickness in the threads. Every word, every glance, pressed deeper into her, until she stopped looking up altogether. But the night that sealed her fate, she could never forget it. The elders gathered beneath the moon, their eyes reflecting its cold light. She had been summoned with Ceres at her side. Alara had thought it might finally be her chance to be seen, to step from her sister's shadow. Instead, she stood trembling as the oldest among them lifted his hand and spoke the words that broke her world apart. "The fire in her blood is too dangerous. She will burn us all." The air had left her lungs in a single rush, her body shaking as the others nodded in grim agreement. Fire. They had seen it. The flicker in her claws, the glow she had tried to hide. They named her cursed, marked her as a danger too great to keep. And while her sister stood untouched, praised as the blessing of their generation, Alara was cast out like rot that had spread too far. Her mother's voice had followed her into that exile, desperate, trembling, whispered through tears as she clutched Alara's face in her hands. "Hide it? Promise me. Hide it, Alara. Never let them see your shift. If they see it again, they won't stop until you're ash beneath their feet." Alara had promised. She had hidden. She had lived with her power buried under chains of fear and shame, convinced it would destroy her if it ever surfaced again. Now, standing before Kaelin, with his eyes fixed on her, as if he could see beneath the armor she wore, that shame swelled until it choked her. She dropped her gaze, but his silence demanded more than she wanted to give. "What is it you're hiding from me?" His voice was low, but it slid under her skin, impossible to ignore. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She swallowed hard, shaking her head, but the question dug deeper. He was not asking like the elders had asked. His tone carried no judgment, no disgust, only hunger for truth. Still, she could not give him all of it. Not yet. Fragments slipped from her lips, sharp and broken. "I was cast out, not because I was weak, but because I was wrong. They said something in me was dangerous. They were afraid of me." Kaelin's eyes narrowed, but not with the suspicion she expected. It was something else, darker, harder, as though he had just been given a piece of a puzzle he had been searching for. "Afraid," he repeated, tasting the word like it offended him. Alara looked away, rain dripping from her lashes. "They had reason to be. I don't always control it. Sometimes it takes me. And her voice broke, the rest swallowed by the memory of burning trees, of children screaming as the night glowed silver with fire she hadn't meant to unleash. Kaelin stepped closer. She felt the heat of him, though he didn't touch her. His presence wrapped around her like chains and safety all at once. "I see beyond what they saw," he said, voice edged with certainty. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to sink into those words and let them be real. But shame was louder, pressing against her ribs, whispering that he would turn on her like the rest once he saw all of it. Still, something inside her cracked, letting the smallest piece of hope bleed through. Could it be possible that he didn't see a curse in her veins? But something more, something worth claiming. That night, when she finally closed her eyes, exhaustion dragging her into restless sleep, the memories followed her, but this time they twisted into something new. In her dream, the fire did not hide. It burned across her skin, a mark carved just over her heart, a flame-shaped brand, glowing brighter than the moon, pulsing in rhythm with her breath. She woke with a gasp, clutching her chest, her fingers trembling over the place where the mark still burned beneath her skin. And in the darkness she realized the truth she had spent her life denying. There was no hiding what lived inside her. not anymore. The grove was older than memory, a circle of towering stones carved long before men or wolves knew language. Moss clung to their faces, like forgotten prayers, and every root that curled through the earth seemed to hum with something alive. Alara followed Kaelin into that place, with her breath caught in her throat, every instinct screaming that she should not be here, yet unable to turn away. The Alpha King's gate was unhurried, purposeful, as if each step pressed deeper into destiny itself. Gold fire still lingered faintly in his eyes, casting sharp glints against the wet bark of the trees. Alara's legs trembled, not from the cold, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of an unseen force that thickened the air. When she finally stepped into the ring of stones, the storm that had pursued her all night seemed to hush. Rain slowed, wind bent its head. The world bowed, and she was left trembling in its silence. Her hand brushed against one of the ancient monoliths, rough, jagged, its surface carved with runes she had never learned yet somehow knew. The instant her skin touched the stone, light burst through the grooves. Lines that had slept for centuries ignited, like veins of fire, racing in patterns that circled the grove. Her pulse stuttered. The stones answered her, and in their glow, the forest whispered her name. Kaelin stood still, his broad shoulders squared, watching her not as a predator or protector, but as something rarer, an equal. He did not move when the ground trembled beneath her feet, nor when silver mist coiled low against the roots, wrapping her ankles like chains and wings all at once. His voice cut through the otherworldly hush, low and steady, the sound of a man who had always known this day would come. "You are the flame bearer." The words landed heavy in her chest, heavier than the storm she had fled, heavier than every cruel whisper she had endured. The pack's old stories, the ones murmured to frighten pups into obedience, rushed back like shards of glass. One marked by fire will come. She will bind or break us. She will crown or consume us all. "No," Alara whispered, shaking her head, stumbling back from the stones as though they burned. "It isn't sit me. It can sit be. I am nothing. But cursed?" Kaelin's tone sharpened, but not with cruelty, with defiance. "That is what they called you. But they were blind. You carry what none of them could bear." The runes blazed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. Each throb echoed a prophecy older than bloodlines, older than thrones. The flame bearer, destined to unite the packs, or to turn them into ash. The choice would not be written by the elders, or even by Kaelin. It would be written by her. Fear clawed its way up her ribs. She remembered her mother's desperate hands clutching her shoulders, remembered the warning, "Hide it, never let them see." And here she was, stripped bare in the glow of the stones, no longer able to conceal what she was. She wanted to scream, to run, to claw her way free from fate's grip. But Kaelin stepped closer, and his presence anchored her, as much as it unsettled her. "Fate is not a curse," he said, his voice dropping low, almost reverent. "It is a crown, one you were born to wear." Alara's throat tightened. She wanted to hate him for the certainty in his tone, but part of her ached for it, ached for someone who believed she was more than a mistake of nature. Her chest burned, not with shame, but with something dangerous, possibility. Yet the moment trembled with danger. For every rune that blazed, a shadow deepened. Beyond the grove, whispers of other wolves stirred. The pack had begun to suspect, and suspicion was a hungry beast. They had feared her once. If they saw what burned within her now, fear would turn to hatred, and hatred had teeth. The mist swirled faster, and in its curl came voices not of flesh, but of spirit. Wolves of the old blood, unseen yet near, their howls threading the wind. A prophecy uncoiled through the grove, carried on breathless whispers that tangled in her hair. The flame bearer will either unite or burn the packs. She will bind the crown in fire, or reduce it to cinders. Beware the mark, for it is salvation or ruin. Her knees nearly gave way. She clutched her cloak to her chest, as if it could shield her from destiny's bite. "I'll destroy them," she gasped. "Don't you see? I am the fire. Fire consumes. Kaelin's hand reached for her, not with force, but with command. Steady, unyielding, warm against the icy air. His eyes burned into hers, not with the savagery of an alpha, but with the relentless belief of a man who refused to let her drown in fear. Or fire forges, he countered. It tempers iron, it shapes, it purifies, it crowns kings and queens alike. Fire does not choose ruin, it answers the will of the one who bears it. You are not ruin, Ilara, unless you surrender to it. Her heart stuttered. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not as cursed, not as broken, but as chosen. The word pressed against her ribs like a wound and a balm all at once. But destiny did not wait for acceptance. Beyond the grove, a murmur grew into voices, wolves gathering, elders arriving, drawn by the same pull that had dragged her here. Their silhouettes flickered through the trees, their eyes catching glints of firelight from the stones, and in their gazes was not awe, but accusation. One of the eldest stepped forward, his voice a blade of ice. She carries the mark, the danger foretold. Do not be fooled by her face, Kaelin, she is the spark of war. Kaelin's growl rumbled low, vibrating the very air, daring anyone to step closer, but Ilara's pulse spiked with terror. This was the moment she had dreaded her whole life. The eyes of the pack turned toward her, not with pity, not with dismissal, but with fear sharpened into resolve. The light from the runes flared higher, licking the edges of her vision. The elders' chants rose, calling her a threat, a curse, an omen that would topple thrones. Yet Kaelin stepped between her and their judgment, his body a wall of defiance, his voice like thunder, as he claimed what they sought to tear away. She is mine, he declared, golden eyes blazing, and through her, the future of every pack will be written. She is not danger, she is destiny. The grove held its breath, but the tension in the air was a storm ready to break. The elders' whispers sharpened, their gazes cutting not only at Ilara, but at Kaelin himself. For by defending her, he had tied his throne, his life, and his pack to the flame she bore. And flame, once kindled, never obeyed. The elders' verdict rippled through the grove, unspoken but heavy as stone. The girl with the mark was dangerous, too dangerous to stand beside the Alpha King, too dangerous to live. And in their darkened eyes, Ilara saw not fear alone, she saw hunger for the throne. The ceremonial fire burned high that night, its flames clawing toward the canopy, as if it too wanted to taste the storm that brewed among the gathered packs. Wolves from every bloodline had come, warriors draped in furs, alphas standing tall in their dominance, elders with eyes sharpened by decades of judgment. The grove that had whispered destiny now roared with suspicion. Every gaze weighed heavy on Ilara. Kaelin stood at her side, but the crowd pressed in, their murmurs cutting through the night air like blades. What should have been a gathering for unity felt more like a tribunal. She glows with cursed fire, one alpha spat, his voice booming across the circle. A trick of dark magic. Do not be blind, Kaelin. She is no savior. She is a weapon crafted to destroy. A ripple of agreement rolled through the assembly, a tide of suspicion swelling against her. Ilara stood with her cloak wrapped tight, but no cloth could conceal what had already been revealed. The mark burned faintly against her chest, pulsing in rhythm with the fire at the center of the grove. She tried to steady her breathing, but the weight of every hostile eye pressed down, suffocating. Then, she saw her twin. Across the fire, her sister's face glowed in the orange light, perfect, adored, untouched by suspicion. A slow, cruel smile curved her lips, a smile Ilara knew too well, the pack's jewel, their chosen one, the mirror that had always cast Ilara in shadow. That smile was not comfort, it was triumph. Shame speared through her ribs. Every wound she had tried to bury, the whispers of being cursed, the night of exile, her mother's desperate plea, bled fresh under her twin's gaze. And in that moment, Ilara understood. Her sister did not stand with her. She never had. She stood with the pack, with their fear, with their thirst, to see Alara fall. The tension snapped when the shadows moved. Wolves, darker than night itself, burst from the tree line, their eyes glowing red, their fangs slick with hunger. Rogues, creatures twisted by exile and bloodlust, slammed into the gathering, their snarls ripping through ceremony like thunder. The crowd scattered into chaos, but the first of the beasts lunged straight toward Alara. She staggered back, heart pounding, instincts clawing their way up from the marrow of her bones. Her half-shift surged, claws lengthening, silver glow sparking at her fingertips. But fear strangled her movements. She had never fought like this. She had only ever hidden. Kalen's roar shattered the grove. His shift ripped through his body, muscles surging, fur tearing through skin. He was magnificent, golden-eyed, massive, every ounce of his being radiating dominance. He tore into the rogues with savage precision, blood spraying the stones, as he fought to protect her. His growls were not just defense, they were a warning to every wolf watching. She was under his claim. But the more he defended her, the more the crowd's suspicion burned. Rival alphas shouted over the chaos, their voices dripping with accusation. See how he throws away his crown for her? See how he chooses her curse over his duty? Their words pierced Kalen even as he fought, but he did not falter. He ripped a rogue apart with his claws, turned, and shielded Alara with his body as two more lunged. His strength was terrifying, brutal. But Alara saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not doubt of her, but of the throne that trembled beneath his feet with every choice he made in her defense. Blood drenched the stones. The fire hissed and spat as shadow wolves fell, but the political wound cut deeper than any claw. When the last rogue lay broken, the grove was silent, but for the sound of Alara's ragged breathing. All eyes turned back to Kalen, to the Alpha King who stood bloodied but unbowed, to the girl with fire-marked skin at his side. A rival Alpha stepped forward, voice hard as iron. Choose. Banish her, or risk your crown. If you tie your throne to her curse, you will drag every pack into ruin. The words struck like a blade. Alara froze, her heart caught between hope and dread. Kalen's chest rose and fell, every breath weighted with war. His gaze cut to her, gold fire softened, torn between the weight of duty and the pull of something far deeper. For one shattering moment, she thought he might speak the words that would break her, thought he might turn, cast her out, sever the thread between them for the sake of the crown. His silence was worse than any roar. Shame flooded her, hot and raw. She would not, could not be the reason a king lost his throne. Her hands trembled, but her voice cut sharp as a blade when she spoke. I will not be your weakness. The words echoed louder than the elders' chants, louder than the fire's crackle. She tore her cloak free, the mark on her chest blazing for all to see, and turned from him. Her legs carried her fast, past the crowd, past the fire, into the forest shadows. Each step was agony, but worse was the way her heart twisted, knowing she had walked away before he could. She ran because staying meant breaking him, and she had been broken enough for both of them. Behind her the grove stirred with noise, shouts, murmurs, the shuffle of feet. But threading through it all came a voice, low and rough, meant only for her though she was already gone. Kalen's whisper, carried through the night like a vow. You are already mine. The forest swallowed Alara whole. Branches lashed her arms, thorns snagged at her shredded cloak, and the cold night pressed tight against her skin. Blood trickled down her leg, where a fang had grazed her thigh during the chaos of the fight. She didn't stop running until her lungs burned, until her vision blurred with tears she hadn't meant to shed. When the last of her strength gave way, she stumbled into the mouth of a cave, dark, damp, hidden by twisted roots and the hush of moss. Her breath rattled, sharp and uneven, as she pressed her back against the stone and slid down, clutching her wound. The mark on her chest throbbed with heat, a cruel reminder of the destiny she could neither flee nor embrace. Inside, shadows closed around her. The drip of water echoed from deep within, steady, mocking the frantic beat of her heart. She curled against herself, trying to quiet the storm inside. No pack, no crown, no one to claim her, only the echo of Callan's voice, rough and unyielding. You are already mine. She pressed her palms to her ears as if she could force the memory away, but his vow clung to her like breath in winter. Warm, dangerous, impossible to forget. Time bled slow in that cave. The fire in her thigh dulled her focus, each heartbeat tugging her closer to unconsciousness. She whispered to herself, a broken prayer. Don't let him follow. Don't let him find me. Please, don't let him care enough to try. But he did. The night split with the sound of footsteps, quiet, measured, yet carrying the weight of authority no shadow could disguise. The air shifted, thickening with his presence before she even saw him. She stiffened, every muscle straining against the instinct to both run and collapse into his arms. Callan stepped into the cave. The golden gleam of his eyes pierced the dark first, catching the faint spill of moonlight at the entrance. He carried something slung over his arm, bundles of herbs, strips of meat, a small satchel of supplies no king should lower himself to gather. His chest still bore the streaks of battle, his hair damp with sweat and rain, yet his dominance filled the cave, as if he were untouched by war. Ilara pushed herself upright, pain flashing sharp, but he was already kneeling beside her. His movements were sure, practiced, not the touch of a ruler, but of a man who had bled too often to count. You should have stayed by the fire, he murmured, voice deep but softened, stripped of command. Running on a wound like this will tear it wider. Her throat tightened. She wanted to spit venom, to throw back every reason she had for leaving. Instead, all she managed was a whisper, thin and fractured. I can't be your weakness. His hands stilled only for a moment. Then, with deliberate care, he pressed a wad of crushed herbs to her leg, the bitter scent filling the cave. You are not my weakness, he said, low, certain. You are the fire that will burn every chain I've carried. The words should have enraged her. Instead, they cracked something open. She swallowed hard, the fight in her chest tangled with something gentler, something she feared far more than rejection. Keelan bound her wound with strips torn from his own cloak, tightening them with careful precision. His fingers brushed her skin, searing trails that left her trembling. When he finished, he settled beside her, close enough that the heat of his body bled into her chilled bones. The cave flickered with sudden light. He had struck flint, coaxing a small fire to life between them. The flames painted his features in amber, highlighting the scars along his forearms, the shadows beneath his eyes. She had thought him untouchable, invincible. But here, stripped of ceremony and crown, he looked human, scarred, weary, breakable. Her gaze lingered. Those scars, they're not from battle, are they? He was silent for a long moment. Then, with a slow exhale, he turned his arm so the firelight kissed the ridges of old wounds. Not all. Some are from betrayal. By blood I thought unbreakable. His eyes lifted, sharp, holding hers. By a brother who wanted my throne more than my life. The confession landed heavy, not as an excuse, but as a truth he had carried alone for far too long. Ilara's chest tightened. She saw not a king in that moment, but a man stripped raw by loss. The distance she had tried to keep faltered, crumbling under the weight of his honesty. She leaned closer, unable to stop herself, words slipping free like secrets she had sworn never to share. My mother told me to hide, she whispered, told me the fire in my blood would be the end of me, if anyone ever saw. I thought, if I buried it deep enough, I could be normal. But no matter how I tried, the whispers never stopped. I was never anything but cursed. Silence followed, thick, charged. The fire cracked, sending sparks dancing between them. Kaelin's gaze softened. He reached, not to command, but to touch, fingers brushing a strand of damp hair from her face, lingering at her jaw. His voice dropped, rough with something that trembled on the edge of hunger and reverence. I don't see a curse when I look at you. I see a fire that could warm a world too long kept cold. Her breath hitched. The closeness, the weight of his words. It was too much, too dangerous, and yet she couldn't pull away. Her eyes lingered on his mouth, on the lips that had whispered possession, that now whispered comfort. The air thickened, heavy with the pull between them. Her pulse drummed wild, as her body leaned forward almost against her will. Their breaths mingled, slow, shallow, breaking on the same rhythm. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin in a touch so tender it unraveled her defenses. Her voice trembled when it broke free. "I want to trust you, but I've only ever been burned." His forehead pressed lightly to hers, his voice low, steady, a vow wrapped in a growl. "Then let me be the fire that warms, not destroys." The world narrowed to this moment. Their breaths, their nearness, the way every inch between them screamed to be closed. Her lips parted, his breath ghosted against her, and the ache of the almost kiss burned hotter than any flame she had ever conjured. But the cave did not stay silent. From the forest beyond, howls shattered the fragile bubble. Dozens, maybe more, sharp, urgent, circling closer. The pack, they had found them. Kaelin's jaw tightened, golden eyes flashing with both fury and resolve. His hand lingered on her face for a heartbeat longer, a silent promise unspoken. Then he pulled away, rising, every line of his body shifting back into the Alpha King. The fire between them had not been extinguished. It had only been delayed. And outside, the hunt had already begun. The howls that pierced the cave were not warning cries. They were summons, and before Alara's breath could steady, before Kaelin could decide whether to shield or fight, shadows filled the mouth of the cavern. Torches flared in the night, casting long fingers of firelight into the hollow. Elders, guards, rivals. And at their center, her twin radiant in silken robes, her hair gleaming with woven silver threads, every inch of her untouched by dirt or blood. She stepped forward as though the ground itself carried her, and the wolves parted, bowing not to Alara, but to her. "Alara of the cursed flame," one elder thundered, his voice echoing against the stone. "You will answer to the council." Hands gripped her arms before she could resist. Wolves dragged her from the cave into the clearing beyond, the forest alive with whispers, growls, suspicion. The fire at the council's altar roared higher, as though eager to see what fate would be carved tonight. Kaelin followed, every stride heavy with dominance, yet even his presence could not silence the storm gathering. They threw her into the circle of light. The cloak she wore slipped, and the mark upon her chest pulsed like molten silver. Gasps cut through the crowd, sharp as blades. The elder's eyes gleamed with triumph, as though her body itself had betrayed her. And then her twin's voice rose, sweet, melodic, sharpened into poison. "She is the Doombringer," she declared, stepping forward, hands raised in feigned sorrow. The prophecy spoke true. Her flame will burn the packs to ash, and while she destroys, I will lead. By blood, by birthright, the throne is mine. The words slammed into Alara like a spear. Her twin's face, a mirror of her own, twisted with cruelty masked as concern. The betrayal was not new. It had been seeded in childhood, but now, spoken before the council, it bloomed into something final, irrevocable. The crowd murmured, wolves shifting restlessly. Fear spread like wildfire. Alara turned, searching for Kaelin, for the one anchor she had left. His golden eyes locked on hers, burning with conflict, and then hesitation. A pause so small it could have been nothing, but to her, it was everything. Doubt flickered in his gaze, just a shadow, just a heartbeat, yet it cut deeper than exile, deeper than shame. He had fought for her, bled for her, vowed she was his, and still, when her sister twisted prophecy into chains, Kaelin faltered. Her breath shattered, rage surged, molten and merciless. The mark on her chest blazed, no longer a hidden brand, but a roaring inferno. Power cracked her ribs open, poured into her veins, clawed its way free. Flames erupted, silver and wild, searing the night with their brilliance. Wolves stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. The altar stones cracked beneath the force. Shadows fled into the trees. Elders shielded their faces as the fire stormed higher, untamed, unmerciful. Her twin's voice broke in a shriek. All sweetness burned away. "See? She is the curse. She will destroy us all." Kaelin stepped forward, hand raised, his voice lost in the roar of her fury. Whether he called her name in warning or plea, she could not hear. Betrayal drowned out every sound but the thunder of her own pulse. Tears burned her eyes, searing as the flames that cloaked her body. She had begged to be seen. She had prayed for belonging, and in the moment she needed it most, the world chose her sister's lie over her truth. Her power answered her grief, answered her rage. Wolves scattered, tails tucked, eyes wide with terror of the firebearer reborn in fury. The council crumbled, their voices lost beneath the storm. The air thickened with smoke and magic, the forest bowing to the force unleashed. Alara threw her head back, and a scream ripped from her throat. Raw, broken, shattering, it split the night sky, carrying with it every wound, every betrayal, every dream turned to ash. Silver flames wrapped her like wings, burning brighter than the moon, brighter than the torches, brighter than fear itself. And in that moment, she was no exile, no cursed twin. She was fury reborn. The prophecy Sep's child, the flame Sep's heir, the doom they feared, the salvation they never saw coming. Her scream echoed until the night itself trembled. And then she was gone, flames trailing her into the darkness, leaving only ruin in her wake. The night had never known such fire. Silver flames stretched from earth to sky, consuming the clearing, blazing through the trees, painting the forest in the colors of her rage. Alara stood at its center, no longer hidden, no longer begging for belonging. Her body was a vessel of power, her blood a storm. Each breath poured heat into the air until the very ground smoked beneath her bare feet. The wolves who had once snarled at her name now cowered, their ears pressed flat, their fur bristling, their eyes glowing with terror. But the elders did not bow. Their chants rose, desperate, summoning shadows from the earth to smother her blaze. Black smoke bled from their palms, forming shapes of beasts born from fear, their jaws snapping with hunger. She faced them with unflinching eyes. But before she could strike, Kaelin's voice cut through the chaos. "Alara." He stepped into the ring of fire, as if it belonged to him, as if the flames themselves bent around his stride. His golden eyes locked on hers, fierce, unyielding, a promise forged in war. In his hand, steel gleamed. In his chest, his wolf surged ready to defend. Not the throne, not his pride. Her. The shadow beast lunged, and the battlefield exploded. Alara's flames met Kaelin's blade in perfect rhythm, as though they had trained together all their lives. Silver fire burned through the creature's darkness, scorching them to ash, while Kaelin's strikes tore through the remnants with brutal precision. The pack, who once turned from her, now fought at her back, their howls rising with the fury of survival. Her twin Sep's voice sliced through the storm. "You cannot hold it," she screamed, from the edge of the battlefield, her robes whipping in the heat, her eyes bright with madness. "The flame will consume you. Just as the prophecy said, it will end us all." But Alara did not falter. The fire bent to her will, each burst sharper, cleaner, no longer wild grief, but controlled strength. Every strike was a choice, every flare an answer. She was not unraveling, she was becoming. The twin, rattled, raised her hands and summoned more shadows, calling the darkest wolves to her side. Yet for every beast that rose, Alara's fire grew brighter, swallowing them whole. The silver flame sang in her veins, no longer a curse but a crown. Kaelin's blade cut down the last of the shadows, his chest heaving, his eyes never leaving hers, for a heartbeat. Time held, only the two of them in the storm's heart. And then Alara spoke, her voice carrying over the battlefield, raw with fire and finality. I am not your sacrifice. The flames surged, swallowing the shadows at once, burning them until nothing remained but glowing embers in the dirt. The pack froze, silenced by her voice, by her fire, by the truth that pulsed in every syllable. She raised her hand, silver light pouring from her skin, searing the night with its brilliance. I am your destiny. Her twin stumbled back, face pale, eyes wide, not with pity, not even hatred, but fear. For the first time, the mirror image who had stolen her life saw her for what she was, not a mistake, not a curse, but the prophecy's answer. And so the tide turned. The council's chants faltered, their lines broken. Wolves surged forward, emboldened, their roars answering Elara's fire. Kaelin fought at her side, his strength a shield, his presence a vow. Together they struck down the last resistance, the battlefield bending to their union, until the night itself seemed to kneel. When the final shadow dissolved, silence swept the clearing. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of scorched earth heavy. Wolves stood trembling, eyes wide, torn between awe and fear. Some bowed their heads, some whispered her name. Her twin was gone, fled into the forest, shadows trailing her like tattered veils, but her absence was not victory. It was a promise of return. Elara lowered her hand. The fire dimmed, retreating into her blood, still thrumming, still alive, but hers now, utterly hers. The pack stared at her as though seeing something both holy and terrifying. Kaelin stepped forward, his chest bare and scarred, his blade dripping with the night's blood. His gaze held hers, unshaken, unwavering. You are no curse, he said, his voice carrying in the stillness. You are the flame that was always meant to burn beside me. Something inside her ached, torn between the gravity of his words and the weight of everything that had been stolen. But she stood tall, the silver glow still flickering against her skin. They had won the night. Yet victory carried unease. The forest was too quiet, the prophecy too raw, too jagged, unsettled. Her twin's retreat was not defeat. It was a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. Elara's flame might have claimed its place, but the fire had not finished speaking. The night bowed, yes, but it bowed with trembling knees. The battlefield lay still. Smoke curled in fragile ribbons against the night sky, drifting above blackened earth and blood-soaked stones. Wolves shifted back into human form, their bodies trembling, their eyes wide, with the kind of fear that had no words. The echo of fire lingered in the air, its heat clinging to the skin of every soul who had stood witness. And at the center of it all, she stood. Elara. Her body still shimmered with threads of silver light, the glow of power not fully dimmed. Her hair clung damp to her temples, her chest rising and falling in jagged rhythm, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted. The moonlight wrapped around her, as though the heavens themselves had chosen to mark her, and in that instant, she seemed untouchable. Not wolf, not merely woman, something greater, something untamed. Yet even as the pack stared, even as whispers broke like waves through the silence, their eyes betrayed the truth. They did not know whether to bow or to run. Some looked at her with awe, others with terror, most with both. And Kaelin's gaze was fire steady upon her, the only one who did not waver, though even he carried the weight of the question she could feel pressing against every chest. Would they choose her, or turn against her? Tell me, if you stood there, if you saw her marked in silver flames, the prophecy burning across her skin, would you call her savior, or monster? Would you take her hand, or fear its fire? Is she the answer the world has long awaited? Or just a girl, cursed with too much power, too much pain, too much destiny carved into her bones? And if this story has lit even a spark inside you, if her fire brushed against your own, do not let it fade here. Subscribe to Clarissa Romance Collections, because here, we do not whisper tales. Here, we tell stories that burn. Dawn broke slow across the horizon, painting the battlefield in muted golds and weary grays. The smoke thinned, curling away like secrets slipping into the sky. Wolves who had fought and bled now slumped in silence, their breaths shallow, their eyes hollow from the weight of what they had seen. And through the wreckage, she walked. Alara. Her steps were unsteady, but her spine did not bow. Kalen moved beside her, his arm brushing hers, his presence steady as iron, though exhaustion dragged at him too. Side by side they crossed the scarred earth, not as savior and protector, not as alpha and exile, but as two souls bound tighter than fate itself had ever intended. The night had not broken them, but neither had it ended. For as their feet pressed into the damp ground, a tremor shivered beneath the soil, subtle at first, just enough to stir the ashes, to crack the silence, then stronger, a pulse, deep and wrong, as though the very heart of the forest had learned to beat against them. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the clearing, long fingers reaching, twisting where the dawn's light should have banished them. Wolves lifted their heads, ears pricked, growls trembling low in their throats. And then it came. A voice. Thin at first, then curling into the marrow of every bone. Neither male nor female, not of this world, yet inside it all the same. She is not the only one. Alara froze. Her breath caught. The words coiled through the air like smoke, sharp with the promise of ruin. Kalen's hand brushed her arm, his growl low, protective, yet even his golden eyes could not pierce the darkness from which the voice bled. Again it came, colder this time, crueler. The true alpha hasn't set risen yet. The wind died, the world stilled, and in that silence, the truth sank like a blade. Tonight had only been the beginning. The dawn around them faltered, paling against the weight of a new storm stirring in the distance. Ilara's heart pounded, the silver flame in her chest, flickering restless, unsettled. Her power had claimed the night, but already the horizon whispered of greater trials waiting, hungrier enemies watching, destinies darker than even prophecy had dared to name. Her jaw tightened, Kalen's eyes locked with hers. Neither spoke, they didn't need to. Together they stepped forward into the dimming light, exhausted, unbroken, and hunted by shadows that promised their story was far from finished. This is instead over.